What I won't do is pretend that God is leading me somewhere I already want to go to escape the painful limitations and challenges within this ministry context. That would be the ultimate spiritual deception, acting as if God had spoken merely to satisfy my own selfish desires already present in my heart. It's the moral equivalent of leaving a marriage because it became difficult. In the opening pages of this book, I shared about my father and our relationship. As I've grown and spent time in prayer, I've sought to understand the depths of the pain in my relationship with him and comprehend the various aspects of where our relationship went awry. As mentioned earlier, my father was married 9 times. My mother was his 4th wife, but I had to endure the courtships, marriages, and divorces of 4 other wives before he settled on his 9th wife and passed away. In our relationship, I lost respect for my father. Observing him move between wives, not to mention the girlfriends in between, I saw him using marriage as a tool for personal benefit. To him, marriage was a means to acquire and keep a woman. When the marriage didn't meet his expectations, he would simply leave, demand a divorce, and move on with his life until he found another bride. To him, it may have made some moral or mental sense to use vows as a tool, asking a court of law to release him based on dissatisfaction with his marriage. Perhaps he felt entitled to greater happiness and believed he had the right to seek it elsewhere with a different bride. I can't imagine any devoted, Bible-believing, Jesus-loving Christian agreeing with my father's notion that emotional and physical satisfaction justified perpetually cycling through marriages and divorces. They would not claim he valued marriage, took his vows seriously, or loved his wife as Christ loved the church. However, many professing Christians replicate the same behavior in their spiritual journey with the church throughout their Christian life and label it as spiritual. They attend a church for a season, abruptly leave when things get tough, withhold financial support when frustrated, engage in gossip and slander, exit without discussion, and post negative online reviews. They use the language of God told me, the Lord was leading me, and God showed me as justification for leaving a church.
Welcome to the Mental Health Janitors, where we help you clean up the mess in your head. I'm your host, Sergeant Q, and with me as always, Doc Jess.
Hey, welcome. Thanks for being here.
And we have a special guest in the studio today, Pastor Matt Kachunas.
Hello.
So Pastor Matt is our pastor of Faith and Victory Church, and he's also an Army veteran who was a mental health specialist in the Army.
Yes.
And now he's an author of an amazing book called The Church is the Ark. So he's going to be with us today. So stay tuned all the way to the end. We're going to talk a little bit about the book and how you guys can get your hands on it. All right, Jess, you want to get into it? Oh, we should do the card. We should have Matt do the card.
No, don't put that on him.
Well, he can answer too. We'll see. We'll both do it.
Okay, so I saw these. So, Q is like the guy at the party who has random knowledge about weird stuff,
Yes.
So I saw these, at one of the pop-up things at the mall this Christmas, and I got these for him.
Okay.
Word teasers, random knowledge. And so what was so funny is when I made him open it in front of like the whole crew out there, like people were out there, the first 3 we pulled were like total random questions and he nailed them. Bam, bam, bam. The whole room was in a uproar laughing. So he hasn't been as, I think it's like 8-4.
I've been on a losing streak the last couple weeks.
All right.
Yeah.
But last week, if you're a flat earther, all right, put flat earth thumbs up in the comments because you know that I got that answer right. Flat earthers.
Yes. Okay. So today our question is, how many times do you have to fold a standard piece of paper in half for it resulting thickness to reach the moon?
To reach the moon?
Mm-hmm. I thought for it to be impossible, I was going to say 7 times because you only fold it 7 times before you can't.
How many times do you have to fold a standard piece of paper in half for its resulting thickness to reach the moon?
Oh.
Once if you give it to Elon Musk. No, I'm just kidding.
5 billion times.
Way off.
Fold it in half.
It's so...
No. I'm going to say like 25 times. 20 times.
See how close he is? 42. Just 42
because think about
times.
You double every time you double. So if you double 1 mile, then you double it to 2 miles, 4 miles, 8 miles.
Okay.
9 additional folds will get you all the way to the sun. I'd like to see that kind of origami.
That's super random.
Exactly. And
So that was close.
No, and the fact that he was even, I was thinking 4 billion, some crazy number, and that he was within 20.
But I guess now I understand the concept.
Right.
But I was like, why would I fold paper to go to the moon?
Because I'm like, okay, 20, I'm like, you have to fold it. So 7 times, if you fold it 7 times, that's the max you can actually physically fold.
Right, I know that. I thought it was 9, but...
Oh, maybe 9. Something like that. It's a really small number.
Right.
So.
All right, well, we're going to lose viewers if we keep on this discussion. So let's go right into... Okay, we do need to do our intro. Our current event today, we're going to talk about the demise in church attendance. Our advancement is going to be talking about online church and the advancement of being able to do things online. Our scripture today, we'll talk about a little later. And then our tool today is just going to be able to have our guest speaker. So...
Yeah, perfect.
Perfect.
That was great. You should do that from now on. You should do the intro part.
Sure.
I like
Go ahead. The demise in the church attendance.
So the demise in church attendance. There was a article that came out just a couple weeks ago talking about how there's been a huge decline over the years in church attendance. And you talk about this in your book, Pastor Matt.
I do. That for some reason, many reasons, I think that church attendance has declined a lot over the last 100 years, but specifically it has declined a lot in the last 20 years, and it has declined even more in the last 4 years since going through COVID. And so by all metrics, if church attendance is the metrics of church health in America, the American church is dying. And if it continues to do this, it might even cease to exist in its current form in the next 100 years if the church doesn't get back to taking ground on the enemy. So, yeah.
What do you think is the number one contributing factor to the decline?
I think that first off, and you're priming me up for my book. I think the number one contributing factor to the decline of the church in America is that American pastors do not preach the value of the church. They preach Jesus, which of course I preach Jesus too, but they don't preach Jesus and the church as something that goes together. They don't preach the body of Christ. They don't preach the bride of Christ. And so your American Christian doesn't see value in the local assembly. Also, starting all the way back in the 50s, when you have evangelists that go out there and lead people to Christ away from the church, they're not teaching them to go to church. They're just teaching them that now that they're a Christian, they're good, but they don't need to be in the church. And now the modern day TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook preachers that just gather an electronic following, people feel satisfied that they're getting content visually in their ears, but they're not connected with real human beings, so they feel like, I don't need to go to church.
Yeah, there's a really popular group. I won't mention them by name, but they're a really popular group, and they travel around and do evangelist techniques in very large metro cities.
Yeah.
And so they travel all over and they do this. They've got some big headliners that come and speak and do these pop-ups and do all of these things. And I was at a missions conference, and I was there as an advisor to help some of these mission agencies that were struggling to get the younger generation into missions. And the founder of that organization was there. And I got to sit and talk with him. And he said the exact same thing. He said, we've been doing it wrong for the last 20 years. We need to change it.
Yeah.
And so what they're trying to do now is still bring that evangelism to these metro cities, but before they go, they want to partner with churches.
Right.
And have churches there that want to partner with them, and then bring some of that congregation there. So that when people come to connect, they connect with the word and the message and they receive salvation. Now they can connect on a local level to a local church. So that's something that I saw just 2 years ago when I was at that conference, that they recognized we're doing this evangelism wrong because we need to get people rooted into the church.
Well, I'm sorry, were you going to say something?
Well, I just wanted to add the Gallup poll that you added in your book as well, about in the 1940s there was about 73% of Americans as members of church, and fast forward to 2020, 47%. And so the numbers speak for themselves.
Yeah. And what's interesting about statistics is that we see it as a 25% decrease, but if you look at the whole, it's a 50% less people are going to church. Anecdotally, my view of a lot of those parachurch organizations, they're fantastic. I love parachurch organizations, and they're supposed to be connected to the church, but not be a church unto itself, because they don't operate as a church. Quick plug for Q Missions. Q Missions is one of the parachurches that do a fantastic job, because you stay connected to a local church and you realize the value of the local church. But some of those organizations, I think, start out that way, but then they get so big, they lose that connection. So then people think like, well, I'm doing the mission of this parachurch, I don't have to be involved with the local church, but it's just unbiblical. It just is. It has, the two go together.
Well, right. And most of our audience knows that I'm a licensed mental health counselor, and I do counsel a lot of families and marriages. And ethically, I see people of all different backgrounds, religious backgrounds, but when I do get self-proclaimed Christians sitting across from me that are seeking Christian counseling, part of my prerequisite to see me is if they are not a part of a local biblically grounded church, if they want to continue seeing me, I say you have to go find that first.
Praise God.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many added benefits to being part of a Christian church. I think centrally Christians should be part of the church, but the ancillary benefits of being a part of it solve so many more of life's issues that,
it makes my job easier.
Or it puts you out of business.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, they just desire relationship, and God designed us for relationship, real, gritty, visceral, vulnerable relationships. And a true biblical church is a place where you can find those things, and people long for it. They really do. They just don't realize that they need it as much as they do.
I think one of the other things that is a big detractor from the church, there's so much more to do now.
Oh my gosh, yes.
With all of these social medias, with all of these theme parks, with all of these events, there's so much more noise out there.
Yeah.
Think about just the movies in and of itself. The movie industry. It used to be you had to go to a theater to see a movie. And then movies, you could get them in the box office and then you could rent them. And now you have them streaming on demand, millions of
on your phone.
On your phone.
Anywhere,
anytime. So there's all these other distractions, all this other noise out there that is vying for people's attention. And so they feel like they're connected through their device with other people, but they're not actually connected. Because on Netflix now and some of these other streaming sites, you can watch a movie with your friend who's not even in the room. You can both watch the same movie across, So you think like, oh, I'm connected, but you're really more disconnected.
My mom told me when she was a kid back in the, I guess it would be in the late 50s, early 60s, and she grew up in Idaho, small town, and all the churches had basketball teams. And so every boy wanted to be on the high school basketball team. And so if you didn't make the high school basketball team, you had to go to the church league. And they had a full church league. And the rules of the church league were you couldn't play in the game that week if you didn't attend church on Sunday.
Amazing.
And so every church had a basketball team, and all those young boys were in church on Sunday because they wanted to be able to play basketball that week. Just a different time and a different culture. But you think to your point, there's nothing else to do in a small town. There wasn't distractions.
Yeah.
So it's like the church was the center of the experience.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the enemy's greatest schemes is to distract us.
Yeah. If you can't make it in, he'll make you busy, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And really, like this topic, like burrows us right into our advancement, and that's online church.
Right, online church. And so this really took off during COVID. So it had been around. You could watch things online, or you could get simulcast of different church services. And this worked a lot in third world countries, where you would have a larger church organization simulcasting their sermons out to these other churches in third world countries. Great. It's been used for a long time. The local church hadn't really been using this online platform, but when COVID happened, it really forced everybody into that. Same thing with online meetings. It was kind of out there. Zoom had been around, but it didn't really take off until COVID because people were forced into that type of communication. So it started out really, really good as a necessity, but now people are using it as a replacement for actually going
necessity versus replacement. That's a really good way of looking at it, right? And I mean, I see churches that I love dearly, but they literally have like online campuses now, which gives people the opportunity to just be a part of an online campus, and they never have to do life with people, right? And what I've seen in the mental health field is that COVID, right, exacerbated social anxieties, and so it's just one more thing to give you that immediate satisfaction of being scared to do something and retreating. And it's not helping the people who have those social anxieties to overcome them. It's just like showing them, oh yeah, this is the safe thing to do, to sit at home and watch church on your TV.
Well, and I think, and I'm sure you guys talk about these types of things, people were designed for relationship and they want relationship. And society as a whole, I mean, you take Christianity and church out of it for a minute. We've got a society that spends their life watching people on television, reading about people, and then they feel as though they know those people and that they have a relationship with these people. I mean, they cry over famous people that die that they've never met because they listen to their songs, they watch them in their movies and television, and they think, I have a relationship with this person because I watch them. And they have no relationship with these people. And so translate that into the church world where I can watch this person, I can listen to this person, I can read this person, I'm close with this person, but you're not. It's false, and you've been given us a false sense of relationship that is not as satisfying. Real relationship is sticky and messy, and so it's natural to not want to have to deal with that. But I just think God designed us for sticky and messy.
Ask us how we know. I've been in some sticky and messy conversations with the two of you.
It's true. But we're still here together.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, we're still here together.
Church is really designed for community. Because when you come, you are with other people, and you go out into the world and you get beat up and you get torn down and all of these things happen, and then you come back into the church, and it's that collective body that everybody's dealing with that stuff. And so it fights that isolation piece where you figure like, I'm the only one going through this. I'm the only one that's messed up. And then you go to church and you realize very quickly, hi, there's a whole bunch of people in here that are messed up, just like me.
Yeah, exactly.
And it makes you, I don't want to say it makes you feel better about yourself, but it makes you feel better about your situation, that, oh, I'm not the only one dealing with this. And that's what isolation does. It makes you feel like you're the only one. So you isolate farther away from people because you're not as good as them, or they've got it together and you don't. And when you only see them online, that's all you see is that little keyhole, looking through the keyhole of their life. But when you actually get to spend time with them, do life with them, you get to see that they have struggles and trials and tribulations just like you. And it fights that isolation. And we know that isolation is one of the major contributing factors of suicide.
And loneliness.
Yes.
Like their new study I read in the last couple of weeks that said that loneliness is just as horrible for your health as like having heart disease.
Yeah.
Stress and loneliness destroys your body on a cellular level. It causes your cells to degrade quicker.
And what's like I would say all three of us are pretty extroverted. Like we're fine with walking into a room and talking to anybody. All three of us are that way.
Yeah.
And some of the arguments that in America that people say, well, I'm introverted. I don't want to be around people. I don't want to be in a church. But what I've noticed throughout the years is that even the introverted people of our church, they still come and just sit and be surrounded by, for lack of a better term, the spiritual energy of the room. And they're still a part of our church. They still want to be in there, and they benefit, even if they're not as like as we are, to just be in the room, be around other humans. It does something to you, even if you don't demonstratively interact with them in the same way that extroverts do, you know?
Yeah, it's great to have that family and that body, because when you're struggling with something, there are people that you can go talk to and they can help you through that, or they can just walk with you through it and pray with you. That is incredible. One of the studies that I loved that came out from COVID was that they showed all these different demographics throughout the whole country. All these different demographics, and all of them suffered equally during COVID, except for one, the church. The church had better mental health during COVID than any other demographic that they studied. Why? Because we have that family, that connection where we stay together. We also have that shared faith.
Yeah.
that shared faith and belief in a common good, and I want the best for you because that's what Jesus wants for you.
Yeah.
And so when people were struggling and feeling fear and all of those things, we had each other to rely on, as where everybody else is isolated away in their own little homes, and just fear was taking over their life. In the church, we didn't have that as much.
Well, in this fantastic book that I wrote, I talk a lot about how the Bible has scriptures that the Bible and God, Jesus, Paul, whoever the author of that specific scripture is, there are certain biblical scriptures that you cannot fulfill unless you are in relationship with somebody. You can't. And so people say, well, I'm a biblical Christian, but I don't need to go to church. And what you were just speaking about right there, it says, there's a scripture that says, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ.
Yeah.
If we're not in the same room, I cannot bear your burdens and you cannot bear mine. And so I cannot walk out the Bible without being in a flesh and blood relationship within the church. And some people say, well, I can do that with somebody outside of the church. And that's true, you can to a point. If you and I only had each other, we could do that. But there's many other people that don't have what you and I have that need to be in the room with other people so that they can find those people that will help them bear their burdens and them to bear mine as well.
Well, and this is a great time to squash the misconception of the scripture where it says when 2 or 3 are gathered.
Right.
Right? I can't tell you how many people, even in my counseling office, when we're on this topic, I have to explain to them theologically the audience they were talking to and the situation that it was talking to in Matthew 18. It was about correcting in the church. It was not about gathering for worship and praise and for bearing each other's burdens. It was for correcting. And so I would admonish you to do your own research on that scripture, because it doesn't mean that if you gather with 2 or 3 people, that's church. That's not what it means. And so you can edit this out if you need to. But also another thing that you can edit out if you need to, because I'm going to go there. Earlier, you talked about how when you go to church, you recognize there's other people who struggle like you do, and you feel it doesn't make you feel better about yourself. It just makes you feel a part of the struggle. And what I would challenge you is, if you're going to a church or you're looking for a church where the people aren't real talking about those struggles, find another church. And I'm not saying to leave the church that you're at. If they do it, don't do it. I say be the person to start doing it. Or if you're looking for a church, find a church that's authentic, and they have small groups for men who struggle with porn, and they have marriage classes or small groups that help struggling marriages and the hard topics. Those are the churches you want to be a part of, because every single church has members and attenders in it that struggle with these things, but some churches don't talk about it, and that's not a healthy, thriving church.
Right. The great thing about technology is it's helped us be more connected than ever, but we're personally disconnected.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
It's false. It gives you a false sense of what is not real.
It does, absolutely. And we can see it, especially with social media, where you have higher rates of mental health problems, depression, anxiety, social anxiety specifically, because people are only looking through the keyhole of their phone into somebody's life instead of actually having genuine relationship with
What I've noticed with my daughter, and she's in that generation. She's 21. She's a little bit older than, some of the new technologies, but she was in high school. She was really into Snapchat and Instagram and Facebook. And she's already, without even being encouraged by anybody else, realized that she wasn't living real life. And she has self-selected and shut down her Snapchat and taken Instagram off of her phone. She still goes on there a little bit, but she wants to live in the moment. She wants to experience real life. She doesn't want to live a digital life. And she just came to that realization on her own of like, I'm not living the life that I could be leading because I'm always on my phone. So
it's a big problem. So Jess, you had some scriptures you wanted to share.
Yeah, let's talk about the scripture. We're going to talk about Hebrews 10:25 that says, "And let us not neglect or forsake," some translations say, "our meeting together as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of his return is drawing near." That's another one of those scriptures that you can't be a Bible-believing Christian and say, well, I don't need to be a part of a church. It's pretty clear right there that you do.
Yeah, and look at the word pictures that I should touch the Bible when I say this. Not the book is not the church is the ark. look at what the Bible uses as a word picture of the church. It's a body, right? And that a body is a part of many different parts that make the whole.
Yeah.
And the church cannot function without all of its parts. Like Paul says, does the eye say to the hand or the ear say to the mouth? Like you can't, because you need every last part of it. And a good, thriving local church takes all types of people from all types of backgrounds with all types of gifts to be able to walk out the Great Commission. Like we have to do it together.
So that's a great segue, Pastor Matt.
Yeah.
I want you to introduce the book, but first I want you to introduce yourself. We just briefly touched on who you are, but I'm sure the audience would love to know a bit more.
My name is Matt Krachunas. I am a pastor and the senior pastor of Faith and Victory Church in Auburn, Washington. I've been pastoring for 20 years. My wife and I and two other couples started our church 20 years ago. And I say this humbly as possible, but just kind of paint the picture. We went from 6 people to about 500 that we're at right now. I was born and raised in Ballard, Washington, center of the universe, attended Seattle Pacific University. I got a degree in psychology, Christian education, and youth ministry, and then I joined the U.S. Army, where I was a mental health specialist for 6 years, and I obtained a master's degree in biblical studies. And so I have a lot of experience with the church and mental health, which is nice to be with you today because I have that. And the way that I add value to people's lives is that I bring them to Jesus and help them get involved in the local church so they can experience the life that God designed for them. So I'm honored to be with you guys today, and I'm honored to talk about this book that I wrote that came from a sermon about the churches of the Ark.
Perfect.
One thing that's really cool you might not know, Aaron, is that we went to the same AIT in San Antonio.
Really?
In the same building.
Yeah.
Just a couple years
So for
apart.
people who don't know, what is AIT?
Advanced Individual Training.
Yeah.
Training.
91 Bravo, Charlie 232, right?
No, I was a 91 Whiskey.
Yeah, but no,
right
the
after.
company. No, the company was Charlie 232.
Charlie 232.
Yeah. That's the same AIT.
I actually started in Charlie 232 and then I failed my EMT test, so I got recycled to Delta 232.
Okay.
But we started in the
You're
same.
a retread?
Yeah.
I'm a retread. Yes.
That's crazy.
I'm not a good test taker, okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, so like just a couple of years. Did you guys have the raccoon that would come up and eat?
No. What year were you there?
2004.
Yeah, so I was there in
3.
1997. So just 6 years earlier.
Okay. Yeah.
97. I went in the Marine Corps in 97, and I was deployed in
What month?
03 to 04.
What month did you join?
So July 7. It was when I shipped. My ship date was July 7, 1997.
Mine was 17 July 1997.
No way.
You know what else happened on 17 July 1997? Or 17 July is the day Disneyland opened.
Is it?
Yeah. It's just interesting.
Yeah. So he went on to be a mental health specialist, the additional training from the medic, and I didn't. I was just a medic.
Yeah.
So tell us the inspiration behind the book. You mentioned that it came from a sermon.
Yeah, so I got invited to preach at a church conference, and they were talking about the church. And I had really had this, just over the last probably 4 years, I've been on this discovery of why do people not value the church? Why, as a pastor over 20 years, I've seen thousands of people come in and out of my church, our church, not my church, but our church over the last 20 years. And I couldn't understand why is it that people don't value the church? And so I just began this discovery, and actually the beginning of it was the Ephesians chapter 5 sermon that I preached about the church being the bride. This is a great mystery, but I speak concerning Christ and the church, where that whole Ephesians chapter 5 sermon is a discourse that people talk about marriage. And as I was studying, I said, this isn't about marriage, it's about the church. And so I wrote a sermon about that being the church. And then it just kind of opened up this whole entire idea of where I saw the other word picture of the church being an ark. So with the church being a bride and the church being an ark, and I went and I preached this church as an ark, and people said, man, this is one of the best sermons I ever heard in my life. I felt like it was one of the most wonderful sermons I had ever preached in my life. And I probably had at least a dozen people that said, man, you need to write a book about it. And so I simmered on it for a couple years. And then, friend, let me explain something to you. Don't ever become friends with Aaron Quinones. I don't know if you ever known a guy like that, but if you ever remotely speak about any sort of goal that you have in your life, this guy will nail you to the wall and make you do what you say you're going to do. And so I've been thinking about it for many years.
Where is it?
It's right in here. I've been thinking about it for many years to write this book, and I accidentally told Aaron that I was going to write it, and he said, I'm going to hold you accountable. So I wrote in my book, thank you to Aaron Quinones for the push to get this project started. And so if it wouldn't have been from Aaron, the main reason I wrote this book was to get you off my back. So that I could actually rest. And
if it works.
I'm never going to tell you one of my goals ever again. I'm a cold ice bathing author because of Aaron.
Me too. I'm an ice bather now too because of Aaron.
I got them both doing the ice bath.
Yeah,
now.
so I'm never telling you one of my goals ever again. So
you percolated on this book for a couple of years, and you speak about the church, but you also speak about your dad in the book.
Right.
And so tell us why you chose to use that narrative throughout the book.
You know, and I don't want to over spiritualize, but I really think it was partly the Holy Spirit. You know, I had always wanted to process my relationship with my father in the written form, because there's a lot there. And then I had been thinking about writing the book for a couple years, and then and I joke about it, but I really do appreciate your prompting me to do it. And so when you were poking me, get it started, just start writing. And I didn't know how to start the book. You have all of these thoughts and feelings in your head, and I started writing it. Well, as it happened, my father died last year. And so when I just sat down and I got in front of my computer and I said, I'm just going to start writing. And the first words that I wrote, which are after the foreword, hold on, I should have had it ready. But the first words that I wrote that were not edited, because when you write something, you edit it over and over. And I wrote the first line I wrote to this book when I sat down the very first day did not change, which I didn't know where to start, was I never had an amazing relationship with my father. And so from there, it just uncovered this relationship that I had with my dad's life, and how he came in and out of relationships with women. I always tell people my dad was happily married for 60 years to 9 different women. And so what came out of that process was realizing the way my dad jumped in and out of relationships with women is the way that people jump out of relationships with the church. And that if the church is the bride and Christ is the bridegroom, that this word picture of my dad coming in and out of relationships was a picture of how people come in and out of relationship with the church. No Christian would say my dad was a good moral man that valued the marriage relationship, but Christians, or people that call themselves Christians, do that to church all the time without realizing that they are breaking their vows with God and the bride by coming in and out of the church. We as Christians all would say, get married once, stay married, work through all of your problems, but then we come to the church and the church has problems. They say, well, I got to divorce the church, I got to leave the church. And that was never God's design. Never. It's like you said earlier, like us being in a relationship now for many, many years, there's been times where we've had conversations, you know what I mean? But we're still here. We still love each other because we walked through those problems. And you guys are still married because you've walked through those problems with your spouses in the same way that I've been married. And so I just think that people should do that with their churches as well. Just stay in the fight, man. Stay in the fight. It's worth it because relationships just get better over time. Yeah.
Now, you talked about you and your dad's relationship in the book.
Yep.
And I'm sure, like for me, I didn't have a great father figure either.
Right.
And so to walk through that would have been difficult. Mm-hmm. Did you find any difficulty in that? For me, I didn't find difficulty. I found release. It wasn't difficult for me to do it. It was, difficult may not be the right word. It was emotional for me, but it wasn't difficult. It wasn't hard for me. It was just emotional, but it was beneficial emotionally for me to be able to process some of that in the written form, just to walk through it and see it, you know. And for me, what it also opened up, now that people are starting to read it, is
a lot of people have dad issues, and so it's really created a bridge for me to be able to talk even more about it. And even some of my close friends that I don't really talk about things unless people ask me about it. I'm not the guy that just like talks about my feelings if you didn't ask me a question. And so some of my friends even have written and said, man, I didn't even know that was where you were at because you never told me. I was like, well, you never asked.
Yeah, which brings me back to a word that you said that is interesting to me. If you could tell me more, you said it was a release.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about that.
I think it was a release because people need relationships. For my mental health background, I'm really good at asking good, open-ended questions. That's what makes a good mental health counselor effective. If you can't ask good, open-ended questions, you're not going to get the other person to talk. And so, because most people don't ask good, real, open-ended questions, I just don't open up. I'm not the guy that needs to tell you what's going on in my life. If you want to know a specific question, ask me a specific answer me a specific question. And so for me, being able to have an opportunity to share things that, frankly, I wanted to share. I wanted to get them out, but people don't ask those questions. It just feels good to articulate it and talk about it. And it just feels good to just get it out. Part of it is because I'm a Christian. I believe that I don't want to dishonor my father while he was alive. The Bible says, honor your father and mother. And so I didn't want to write some of the things I wrote about my dad while he was alive because I felt like it would dishonor him. And so I just felt a release from God to be able to talk about these things publicly because now that he's passed on, I don't feel like he's going to read this one day and think he wasn't good enough or he didn't do enough. And so it was nice to really just kind of let it all out.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, journaling was a big part of my mental health journey. It was very therapeutic.
Yeah.
And so I was curious if you could speak maybe a little bit to that, about that therapeutic process to encourage other people to not shy away from those thoughts, feelings, and emotions they may have, but actually just write it down, even if it's just for themselves.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I would encourage you, if you have issues that you want to walk through or talk through, and even I think of the idea as a book. One of the things that I struggled with is that I didn't want to write it because I figured it's not going to be a bestseller and a million people aren't going to read it. So what's the point? And one of my pastor friends said, if only the people from your church get blessed by it, then it's worth it. Mm-hmm. It's worth it just to write it. And so writing is kind of the same thing. Even if I had never published this, it still would have benefited me just to get it out on paper. When you have a concept or a thought or a feeling, it does something to you to write it down. The pain of my life has a lot less power over me when it's on a paper instead of in my mind. And so being able to walk through some of the pains in my life on paper just kind of took its power away from where it was inside of me.
That's really good. The pain of my life has a lot less power when it's on paper and not in my head.
Yeah.
That's good quote. Yeah.
That's a really good quote.
Yeah, that was good, wasn't it?
That was good.
That's copyrighted.
It's good enough that I remembered it and could quote it right back.
Yeah, that was really good.
That was really good.
Yeah.
I experienced a similar thing when I wrote my book. Some of those stories, it was my journal. For my journal, I had to read back through my journal and put that in there. And you're really kind of just laying yourself bare for anybody to see and read and then judge you based on just that little tiny snippet that they read. Yeah. And it is so terrifying, but it's freeing at the same time. Because once it's out, it's out.
It's out.
And so it takes that fear of what are people are going to say or do, it takes that away because it's already out there. And so those were one of the things that I found very therapeutic, and I still do it, is journaling, which then became my first book. And so as you were writing that and talking about your dad, I had an idea that it would be therapeutic for you as well to walk through.
I appreciate you pushing me to do it. Thank you.
So Jess, as a mental health professional, that you do this for a living, what are your thoughts around the idea of journaling and putting this stuff on paper? I guess a better question would be, what are some techniques that people could do to make this more effective for themselves if they're going to start this process?
Yeah, well, I want to go back to something that Pastor Matt said, and that was the release word. Mm-hmm. There was a release. And if you don't have somebody in your life asking you those open-ended questions to help you release some of these things that are going on in your mind and in your body, they're pent up. And so I'm always going to advocate for seeing a mental health counselor because I need a job. But if you're not to that point of wanting to go seek a counselor, there is a certain level of release you get from healing you get from journaling and putting it right. The quote is, remind me if it has a lot. My feelings have a lot less power on the paper than they do in my mind. Right. And so journaling, I make a lot of my clients journal while they simultaneously come to counseling with me. And whether that's, hey, I see an area in your life where you're very pessimistic. I want you to do a gratitude journal every day. Research out there, professional research, scholarly research has shown so much benefit to that, but also the benefits that I see in my own practice when I get people to do the gratitude journal is amazing. And so there's all different kinds of journaling you can do, whether it's gratitude journaling. You can just Google, hey, give me some journaling prompts to start uncovering who you are, what motivates you, what are your core values, so you can know what triggers you and makes you angry. We should do a whole podcast on journaling, but from my professional experience, journaling can be and often is a really good release of those feelings so we don't hold them in if we don't have a trusted, open-ended question person to prompt those things from us.
Another person you can talk to open-ended is God in prayer.
Yeah.
Seriously.
It's really beneficial to pray these things through. A lot of counseling is listening, and God is always listening. And so when you're able to pray through your feelings and your thoughts and your struggles, it's almost as if God wired us to know that it's better for our mental health when we verbalize what we're going through and talk to Him about it.
Right?
It's almost like
I was thinking the other day when I was at my 15-year-old is doing track, and we were at an all-day track invite, like 9 to 7. It was, anyways, there was a lot of downtime. Okay. I forgot my headphones, so I couldn't sit and doom scroll. So I spent a lot of quiet time just watching people and then praying. I was like, I have so much time to pray today. And I was thinking as I was praying, like, how often do I hear people say, oh, I get bored, or, oh, like, I don't have time to pray, all these things. And I'm like, I probably spent 4 or 5 hours that day just spending time with the Lord.
That's awesome.
And I was like, I genuinely miss being bored because I'm never really bored. I'm spending time with my maker, my creator.
Right.
And not just that, I like in any downtime you have, forget being bored. Replace being bored with, I get to spend time with my creator, right? But also sleep. When I hear people, I can't fall asleep, my mind is going. I have a physical list on my nightstand that if I can't fall asleep within 5-10 minutes, that's a healthy time to lay there. I know it feels like eternity, but that's a healthy time. I have my list, and I go down my list and I start praying for people. And within like 3 or 4 minutes of praying, not that it's boring, but I'm asleep because my mind has extended to somebody else and not my own worries, and I'm able to fall asleep. And so my sleep has gotten so much better after I've just learned that little tool. And then when I wake up in the middle of the night and I can't fall back asleep, I have my list right there. And it's just been a game changer for me. So I'm glad that you brought up prayer. That's so good.
One of the things that came up for me when you were talking about that, the fear in your head and then putting it on paper, is what we talked about a few episodes before, when we've talked about a lot actually, which is the way the amygdala works with an imagined fear versus a real one. And so to bring it back to the brain science, just corroborate what Pastor Matt was saying about writing it down. If a bear came into the room right now, our amygdala would pop, right? And we'd all be like, oh, bear, fight, flight, or freeze, right? I'm going to trip these guys. I'm going to be booking it out there. Because I don't got to be faster than you guys. I just got to be out the door first. But
there's only one door.
But what happens is when the bear leaves, when the threat is gone, our amygdala says, oh, we don't need this adrenaline and cortisol anymore. And you go from the sympathetic nervous system into the parasympathetic nervous system, into that relaxed feed and breed state. The problem with an imagined fear, something that's only in your head, is that the brain doesn't know when to turn that off.
Right.
So it just keeps pumping you full of all of those chemicals that cause you stress and anxiety, because it doesn't know to turn it off. It never goes back into that parasympathetic nervous system. So we have Sergeant Q's Super Sour Mighty Minty Brain Bangers that are going to be coming out, but you don't even need those.
I had them.
You did have them.
Yeah, I did have it.
But you can write these things down, these fears that you have, you can write them down. You can pray them out, because whatever you take from the darkness and you bring it to the light, whatever you take out of your head and speak it out to the Lord, write it down on paper, you're bringing that outside. And now you can tell your sympathetic nervous system to turn it off, to go back into that relaxed feed and breathe state. I do this a lot at night. I'll wake up and I'll feel stressed about something I've got to do, and I will literally tell my brain, that's important, let's deal with it tomorrow. Because what's more important is getting good sleep tonight so that I can handle that problem in the morning. That's an exercise that I do on a regular basis. Otherwise, my brain will just continue to go down that path of not just that one thing, but all these other fears that I have, or all these other things that I need to get done. And so it's a good exercise to write these things down and take them out of your mind and put them on paper into reality, so then you can recognize it and turn it off.
Yeah. As you were talking about that, I know we're really wrapping up here, but this might be a good idea for another podcast. I know a few episodes ago we've been talking about PTSD. Mm-hmm. And one thing, when you gave the analogy of the bear entering the room, and then when it leaves, you're able to say, oh, I'm not in danger anymore, right? I gotta, maybe between now and the time we do this podcast, I can look at the article that I read or the research I read about the difference between the wars and why PTSD is so much more prevalent today in wars versus World War I, World War II, or those wars, because they would go to the battlefield, fight a battle, retreat, and our brains are made to, engage in that and then retreat and say, okay, I'm safe. But fast forward to it started in the Vietnam War, where it was danger constantly fighting for your life, constantly wondering if you're going to get bombed or shot. It was never go to the battlefield, fight and retreat. And that's when I was deployed for 360 plus days, my life was at risk every hour of every day with incoming mortars and so that's when my amygdala got really screwed up, because it never could tell the difference between a real threat and a false threat, and it was always a threat. And so that might be a really cool episode. So yeah,
I like that. We can definitely talk about that. I know I've read something similar about the front lines versus everything's the front line now. Where there used to be a front line, and now that line is gone.
One thing I would add, you were saying what I was thinking about from what we've been talking about today, is if church attendance was higher in the 1940s than it is now, how many of those people that came back from war went back to church and they were in relationship?
Yeah, for healing.
For healing. Versus how many people that came back and they didn't go back into community.
Yeah. That's huge.
Huge. And I've never thought about that until you were saying that, because we were just talking about church attendance and community, and how many of those soldiers came back from World War II and just immediately went back to church. Because if 79% of people were involved in churches back in the 1950s, then it stands to reason that all of those soldiers, more of them probably went back to church and they found community. Yeah. And if that number's a lot less, how many came back to nothing?
Yeah, that's a really good point.
That is a great point.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that.
So the book, where can they find it?
Well, you can find it at thechurchestheark.com. You can find it at seawardpublishinghouse.com, and you can also find it on amazon.com. I would encourage you to buy it from Seaward. It costs less money. Amazon takes a big chunk out of your book sales. That's how Amazon makes a lot of money that way. So it's nice to have it on Amazon, because for some people it's just easier to get to, but it benefits the author and the publisher a whole lot more if you buy it from seawardpublishinghouse.com. But you can find it all at thechurchestheark.com.
And I'm gonna go on a leg here, and I'm gonna, if you are not attending a Bible believing authentic church, we all go to the same church, you're always welcome to come check us out. Faith and Victory Church on A Street in Auburn.
Yes.
And Amazon is one of our sponsors, so we're gonna have to edit that piece out.
Oh, it is?
No, I'm just kidding.
Oh.
Someday.
All right, so this is what I want to leave the audience with. What is the biggest takeaway for the book that you have for people to walk away with?
It's very easy. When you become a Christian, you joined the invisible church. If you're watching this and you say, I'm a Christian and I'm not in church, you already are in the church. You're in the invisible church. But if you look throughout the last 2,000 years of history, when you joined the invisible church, it usually manifests itself as being part of the visible church. And so if you're not part of the visible church, you should question whether or not you're part of the invisible church, because you should want to be in the visible church. So book goes greatly in depth into that concept, challenges you to be in relationship with your local church. So.
And feel free to contact us if you are not local and you want us to help you find a good, authentic, Bible-believing church, and we'll do that. We'll totally do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And as always, we hope to educate, empower, and encourage you on your mental health journey. I'm Sergeant Q.
I'm Doc Jess, and we're out. Hi guys, Doc Jess here from the Mental Health Janitors, and I wanted to sneak in here to let you guys know about a really exciting opportunity that Sergeant Q is going to be sharing with us. He has an award-winning signature talk that he's going to be holding on Friday, May 10th at 6:30 at Faith and Victory Church. This is an incredible opportunity to get some free mental health training from one of the best. I know I'm going to be there. And I just want to invite all of you guys to be there. Make sure you guys sign up, and the link of how to sign up will be in this video. Thanks so much, you guys. Hope to see you there.